Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 154. My name, as always, is Dr. David C. Noe. I am in the vomitorium this evening, Vomitorium South. This would be the bunker, the basement of the RHB bookstore and coffee house with my good friend and fabulous co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkles. How are you this evening?
I'm feeling really good, Dave. Yeah,
did I mispronounce your name?
You pluralized my last name. It's just Winkle.
Yes, more of you the better, I say.
Right, exactly.
Why would I have done that?
Well, I think it's because we have a note from a listener.
Okay.
A shout out. This is actually a second shout out for him.
Should we give him one?
Wow. I mean, he did identify me as Winkles.
He did. He said, "Dear Doctors Noe and Winkles."
Maybe he was just trying to pluralize like the both of us. Like together we're a duo.
But why didn't he say Noe's is in Winkles?
It's a mystery.
Okay.
Right. So I don't know how far down the rabbit hole we want to go with this.
All right. So this is from one Thomas Flynn.
Yeah.
Right, so do you enjoy this, or does it kind of get under your Flynn?
Oh, it's a little bit under my Flynn.
All right, well, let's hear it.
All right, so Thomas writes, you kindly gave me an extended shout-out back in episode 104. I was listening to episode 151, he writes, the second episode on Lucian's Alexander the False Prophet. I am as disappointed as Jeff that there are to be no more.
Let's just pause there a moment and appreciate that.
Yeah.
And let that sink in. There will be no more.
There will be.
Okay, right. Continue.
Exactly. He says, I still have 7 minutes to go, so maybe Dave relents. Did Dave relent?
He did not.
He did not.
he relenteth not.
Right.
And I have to say that this individual, Mr. Flynn, pointing it out, makes me even less likely to relent.
Really?
Yes.
It makes you just want to dig in?
That's right. I'm now even more unrelenting. There will be no Lucian on my watch.
I got you.
Okay.
And I think if Thomas is a regular listener to the podcast, he should have realized that.
He should have known.
Known.
Does he even listen to the show?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, don't provoke me or I'll be more unrelenting.
Right. Does he have anything else here for us?
Yes, indeed he does.
Okay, what does he got?
He says, I must issue 2 corrigenda.
Oh, no.
Now, I'm not in favor, really, of that tone.
You don't like the tone?
I must issue? What is this? Someone compels him? Conscience is driving him?
Right.
I don't feel like you have...
Or it's kind of a false courtessy, but he's just itching to drop the hammer.
Yet Niagara Falls must issue, right? Or else the water gets all backed up.
Right.
An animal about to give birth must issue,
right.
But,
okay.
Tom, you must issue?
I don't know, yeah.
Am I being too hard on the audience?
Maybe a little bit. So what does he have to say?
All right, number 1, he says, the Council of Chalcedon, there's that word again, did not issue a creed. Or the fathers of the council thought that they did not, since the previous council of Ephesus had explicitly forbidden the making of more creeds. What Chalcedon produced was a, scare quotes, definition.
Okay.
Sorry for the pedantry, he says. Are you really, Tom?
I'm not so sure he's sorry.
I'm not so sure. I have just been marking essays on this topic, he says, and it has been on my mind.
Okay.
I would like to say, with all due grievance and irritation, Tom is probably right.
Yeah.
I should not have said that they issued a creed. I meant creed in the general sense of doctrinal pronouncement.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the audience can't see, but I'm gesticulating wildly as I'm trying to generalize.
When were we talking about the Council of Chalcedon?
It was in episode 151.
Okay, that's not that long ago. Man, I'm losing it.
You were asking me to put Lucian of Samosata in a kind of context.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, you want to read number 2?
Yes.
Because I think you were responsible for this one.
Oh, I think I was,
All
yeah.
right.
So he writes, the Friends Romans Countryman speech was delivered after Caesar died. Anthony was not.
We knew that.
We did, right?
Okay.
But I think it was Anthony's nudity that was the problem.
I see.
So he says Anthony was not naked when he delivered it. Right? He's right. So and he goes on to say that this is when Antony offered Caesar the crown during the Lupercalia. That's when he was all.
He raced around the track.
Yes,
in the nude.
And
but then later, giving the speech, he was fully clothed.
When he was offering the crown. I think he was still nude up there.
Well, just go on, please.
So if he were Cicero...
If he were,
Cicero would not have failed to mention it in the second Philippic.
Well, I don't... that's an argument from silence.
Yeah?
You don't support an argument for nudity with an argument from silence.
I saw that on a bumper sticker somewhere. Right? He says, I've just finished teaching a course on that text. He was naked, more or less, at the Lupercalia in February of 44, during which he attempted to place a crown on Caesar's head. Cicero expresses his disgust at a consul, Antony was Caesar's colleague in 44, not only attempting to make man king, but to do so without a stitch on. Okay, so
all right,
Cicero did mention Anthony's lack of pants
Right.
that time. All right. Yeah.
Yes.
Fair enough.
So do we stand corrected then by Mr. Flynn?
I guess so.
Okay.
Right.
Good. And how does he sign off?
He says, yours ever.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean...
Has our friendship really with Mr. Flynn reached that stage? How about yours for a while?
For a while, right.
Or until we grow tired of it.
Yes, yours permitting unforeseen circumstances, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Are there any other podcasts? I don't really know much.
Yeah.
That take the time to roast people who write in?
I don't know. I don't know exactly.
Should we tell Mr. Flynn thank you for listening?
Yes, thank you for listening.
Thank you,
right.
Thomas,
yes,
for listening.
We appreciate it.
We do.
Right. And I hope that he takes this as good-natured ribbing. At least on my part. You got
Oh, no.
No, not at all.
My ribs are good-natured,
Okay.
too.
All right.
We have yet another corrigendum.
What happened here? Okay.
Someday we're going to have to do an episode that's just entirely
Just corrigenda.
corrigenda. This is actually only addressed to me.
Yeah.
And I had this coming. Dr. Noe, I just wanted to make sure that I heard you correctly on the podcast recently. I think I heard nihil novi sub solem, nothing new under the sun, but it should be sub sole. I probably misheard. Oh, there's the kind of humility I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then he says, love the podcast as always, signs off with a little bit of Latin, servet te Deus, God guard you, DP. Well, he's right.
He's right.
He is right.
Did you say solemn?
I said solem.
Okay, all
and I had a moment of indecision and lapse of memory.
Right.
As podcasters will do,
Sure.
as you know. There should be an ablative there after sub.
Right.
Sub solem means to a position underneath.
Yes.
Sub sole means in a position already underneath.
Gotcha. Yes.
Sorry for the pedantry.
Right. I don't know if you're sorry.
I'm not sorry.
Right.
I'm never sorry. Jeff, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, before we get into that,
Okay.
can I just share just a little bit?
Yeah, I'd like to hear this.
What's going on? So, if you've been to the grocery store lately,
Yes.
the prices are up. Right?
Oh, yes.
It's tough, right? So I thought, it's the summer months. My teaching load is lighter. I thought maybe I'd try to make a little extra scratch. Right? And how to do this. I thought maybe you can sell some things on that internet.
Right.
And so I was talking to my wife about this.
I don't know where this is going.
I said, I've noticed people really, they love knickknacks. And maybe I could craft some knickknacks and or sell them or teach people how to make them.
Right.
And she said, it's all inside your head. She said to me.
Okay.
And but I was going.
This business opportunity. She's saying
it's nonsense, right?
Okay.
And so, but I decided I came up with this kind of admittedly weird idea. I found a way to kind of shape sponges into bread shapes.
Okay.
All right. So you take your sponge and you make it into a little bread shape, and it looks like a nice little knickknack, right?
Yeah.
So I was saying this.
Just slow down here,
Yes.
man.
Okay.
Listen, you had this business idea.
Yes.
People love knickknacks.
Yes, they do.
You're gonna take bread and shape it into like a sponge shape,
Opposite. Take the sponge and turning it into a bread shape.
like a piece of bread. So
Yes.
there's the knickknack.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I thought that as I was getting more successful at this, that it
Right.
would be even more money, like teaching people how to do this, right?
Okay.
And so my wife, she was not on board. She was saying, she was saying, slip out the back jack, make a new plan stand. And she had no time for this. But I went ahead and I wrote and I self-published a book on how to do this, and it's called 50 Ways to Loaf Your Loofah.
Oh my goodness. So, it's 50 ways to leave your lover.
Right.
So you came up with
50
the title
ways-
of the book is 50 ways to loaf your loofah.
Yes.
Oh man.
See, I was trying. I know we were in like the classical literature mode. I could not come up with a thing.
Yeah.
So I had to go back to classic rock.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, the gauntlet gets ever more thrown down, doesn't it?
That's right. I can't wait to see what you come up with next week.
I'm going to have to cancel all my appointments. This is grueling. Did you stay hydrated while you were working on this?
Oh, it was, I did. I had my Gatorade and everything nearby. Yeah.
So tonight,
Yes.
we are going to have a topically themed subject.
Yep.
And that is the American founding,
Yes.
as promised. Now, Jeff, have we talked about this topic before on our little podcast?
We have. We've talked about the works of this this author, one Carl Richard.
It's Richard.
Do I have that correctly?
You do.
Right. And on paper, it looks like Richard.
It looks like Richard.
This guy has probably had gone through his life correcting everybody.
I bet.
Whom he meets for the first time, who
Yes.
reads his name.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Winkles.
Wink-
Very similar. But we covered him in episode 44.
We did.
Which, if my math is correct, is 110 episodes ago.
That is true.
That would have been way back in 2021.
Where we were still recording under the table.
That's
believe,
right.
Yeah.
We were just total novitiates.
Yes. And it was the title of that episode was Father's Foundings, Classics in the American Revolution.
You came up with that title.
I did.
Yes, Father's Foundings. You like the tongue twisters.
And it was talked about the influence on the classics on the founding fathers and their thought and their writing.
In order to motivate more recent listeners to the podcast to go back and listen to that one, which I thought was quite a lot of fun.
It was.
We
really
went through that
interesting.
book fast. Remember, we were sitting by the lake. I think it was on July 3rd in the evening.
Is that right? Wow.
I believe so.
Good memory.
And, there were, shells exploding outside, and so. Do you remember that?
I don't remember
the
that.
rocket's red glare.
I believe you.
So this is what you wrote as the, the episode description.
Yeah.
Oh, say, can you see where this one is going? Many people have heard about the influence of the Roman Republic on the shaping of the American government, but are perhaps unaware how much deeper the ancient underpinnings go. This week, with Carl Richards, or Richards as we called him at the time, the founders of the classics, Greece, Rome, and the American Enlightenment as their guide, Jeff and Dave take a star-spangled look, but you can't make this stuff up, at the Greeks and Romans, read, revered, and almost, I should have said Paul revered, and almost rejected by the founders of the United States. From the earliest days of the Revolution, Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, and others saw themselves and each other through the prism of many an ancient great, both historical and fictional. Oh, that's quite a sentence, Jeff.
That's not bad.
Yeah. What did it mean that Sam Adams was the Palinurus of the Revolution? Well, the listener's going to have to listen to the 28 episodes of our Aeneid series.
Yes. Right.
Why did Washington see himself as Cato? Why does Benjamin Rush, boo, come along and try to pour cold, stale ale over the whole classic-y enterprise? And perhaps most importantly, if you don't have busts of your friends in your personal library, are they really your friends?
That's right. My bust of you.
Yes?
It's still on order.
Okay.
Right, but
Am I going to be wearing a Roman toga?
yeah, exactly. It's gonna be full on classical, right? And it's gonna have a pride of place in my library.
Am I going to be the same way that Caesar describes Cassius in the Shakespeare play?
What is it like?
Jan Cassius has a lean and hungry look.
That's right. Yeah.
Is that going to be me?
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't have a bust of you in my office, but I do have a little picture.
You do.
Yeah, and I light a candle in front of it. And
Nice.
I think, is he going to come up with some good pun this week, or what are we going to do? 50 ways to loaf your loofah.
You got it. That's
Whoa.
right.
So that's what number 44 was about.
Yes.
But the fabulous Carl Richard not only wrote that book, The Founders and the Classics, he wrote a follow-up book, which may even be better. The title of which book, Jeff, is...
The Golden Age of the Classics in America, Greece, Rome, and the Antebellum United States.
Nice.
Yeah.
Catchy title.
Very catchy.
So as we get into that,
Yeah.
Professor Richard received his PhD in history from Vanderbilt University in 1988. His research interests include intellectual history, American history, and the history of ancient Greece and Rome. This guy, I looked up his CV.
Yeah.
We had some correspondence a few years ago. I'm still hoping to get him on the program. A fascinating individual, but he has written a string of fantastic books on this subject.
Do you know, is he versed in Greek and Latin? Is that part of his background, or don't you know?
I can't say,
Yeah.
and I'm probably not the person to ask because this is one of the things I'm so ornery about.
Right. Okay. All right. We'll
Among the many.
We'll leave it to somebody else to ask that
Yeah.
question. Okay.
So I think, Jeff, that you have our opening quote
Yes.
this week.
Yes.
And it's actually from the text itself, is it not?
It is. It's the first sentence in chapter 1. The chapter is entitled Classical Conditioning, School, Home, and Society. And Mr. Richard writes, like their forebears, many antebellum Americans were socially conditioned in the schools, at home, and society at large to venerate the classics. Most antebellum Americans who were familiar with the classics first encountered them in grammar schools and academies, the number of which steadily increased as the population grew and the United States expanded westward. Instruction at these schools, which focused on the study of the Greek and Latin languages, differed remarkably differed remarkably little from the training that colonial students had received 2 centuries earlier. Colleges increased classical knowledge further among the growing numbers of Americans who attended them. For the first time, many women and African Americans were formally trained in the classics. Greek, once the neglected stepsister of Latin, began to approach equality with it as Greek drama was added to the classical curriculum. Parents often took care to reinforce this classical conditioning in the home. Most American leaders continued to insist that the classics were essential to the production of a virtuous and republican citizenry, and as a result, school curricula continued to emphasize Greek and Latin until the late 19th century. By then, the classics had left a lasting imprint on American society, shaping the new nation's rhetoric, art, architecture, books, plays, journals, and law.
Fascinating. There's a lot packed in there.
There's a lot packed in there. I love the clarity of his writing.
He's a good writer, isn't he?
Very good.
Lucid. I would say even perlucidum.
Yes.
But we see here that American leaders, most American leaders, continued to insist that the classics were essential to the production of a virtuous and republican citizenry. I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to guess that you watched the so-called presidential debate last Thursday evening.
I did not.
You did not?
I did. With those kinds of things, I usually will read about the aftermath and maybe watch clips.
Some clips?
I find that those things very difficult to watch.
Why?
I just find...
Have you tried adjusting the antenna?
And it doesn't have to do with the reception.
Okay.
It's just... It brings up all kind of the fraughtness of the current tension of and I don't think that they're game changers anymore. I don't think they're the people sitting on the fence aren't going to be persuaded one way or the other. So I see it a kind of a little pointless. Did you watch it?
I did. I didn't watch all of it. I came to it late and I left it early, and then I watched some clips. My point, though, is that I don't remember either of the current presidential candidates of the 2 major parties referencing the classics at all.
No.
Not one of them dropped Latin or Greek bon mot or anything even approaching some, reference to Cicero or Catiline or Demosthenes or Plato. In fact, if we have some listeners who follow that much more closely than we do, which I assume is the case, maybe one of them can search through their memory and see, did Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden say anything about the classics?
Almost assuredly not.
Right.
In fact, the only example of that kind of thing that I can think of from a presidential candidate, I think I've mentioned this on the on the podcast before, is a couple of years ago I was with my family in Indianapolis, and we went to the place. It's a park where it was the night when MLK was shot, and
April 4,
1968, and of course this is way pre-internet, and that evening in Indianapolis, Robert Kennedy Sr. was giving a stump speech.
Whose son is a current
he's kind
candidate.
of a third-party candidate, right? And he delivered that news to a overwhelmingly black audience in Indianapolis, and he quoted Aeschylus.
No kidding.
To express, and it's on the plaque there. He quoted Aeschylus to kind of express the deep pain that seeps into one's heart, and it was beautiful.
Wow!
And it was really impressive, and more impressive that he did it off the cuff.
It is impressive.
He knew his Aeschylus,
presumably, or for sure.
Well, presumably
off the cuff.
Well, I mean, he had very little time to prepare. I mean, he was ready to give a political speech, and he was told by his aides, "This is what happened in Memphis." So
his mind immediately went to Aeschylus.
Right.
Mr. Kennedy's politics are probably not mine.
Right.
But anybody quoting Aeschylus, I'm kind of a sucker for a good Greek drama reference. Probably
seriously
would have pulled me in.
Right. And can you think, of course, my ears aren't attuned to this, but any other presidential candidate or president since then?
In recent times?
Of a notable classical reference?
No, but we might get a little bit further afield here. But I did read that George W. Bush, 2000 to 2008, was the last president to have studied Latin.
Oh, really? Okay.
Seriously during high school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Mr. Clinton was a great fan of Caesar's Gallic Wars.
Okay, yeah.
And I read an article somewhere. Who knows?
Right.
Distant mists of the past. But Jeff, you got a jumping off point here
I did, yes.
for this particular episode, because It's a massive book.
Yeah.
And very interesting. And we're not going to cover it all in one evening.
No.
How did we get through the Founders and the Classics in one episode?
No, we also got the entire Iliad in, what was it, 3 episodes?
4, I think.
Was it? Even still, that's criminal.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
we were young and inexperienced
Right.
and much more disciplined and less self-indulgent.
Right. And I think and all told, I think it's better to do a few things well than try to do everything poorly.
In those days, there was less Paradise Lost, Tale of Two Kitties.
Right.
Here I glow again on my own.
We weren't wasting the audience's time
That's right.
nearly as much.
We're much better at that now.
Right.
Okay, so the 9 things that you gleaned
Yes.
from Richard
Yeah.
as to why classical ed?
Right. So it just struck me as I was reading this first chapter is that I think Richard he's much more interested in the what than the why.
Much more interested in the what
than
the why.
Right. He's going to talk about this is what classical education looked like.
Okay, so he's an historian, in other words.
Yes.
He's driving at describing accurately the landscape as he sees it.
Exactly. Right? And he's less interested, why classical ed in the first place, but it comes out.
Okay.
And so I thought I was writing down things that where it pops up in really just the first half of this chapter of what I took to be the reasons why the antebellum Americans thought this was important.
Right. And I love the way that you phrase this because it conjures up in my mind the image of you in overalls and maybe like a straw hat.
Yeah.
You're just going through the fields of Richard's book
And
just gleaning.
and picking up the
Just a little bit at it, throwing it into the basket that's slung over your shoulder.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, and I thought this would be interesting because I think this overlaps with some of the conversation we've had about like modern classical ed, and
You're trying to bait me here, aren't
a little
you?
bit.
You're trying to drum. I can see it.
No, it's partially that, but I'm always interested to hear what you think.
Okay.
And so I'm interested, like as we go through these. One is that what you took away from Richard? Are the things that you would add or take away? And then most especially, do you think these are good reasons? Right.
All right.
So one is that, and this came out in that very first.
So this is
paragraph.
number 1.
Yep. This is that classical education is important because the early Americans thought it was because it encourages virtue and undergirds liberty, the American experiment.
Okay. Encourages virtue.
Yes.
And undergirds liberty.
Yes.
Yes. I think that's true, but is it uniquely true of the classics?
Gotcha.
Nobody reads Mein Kampf, for example, as an illustration of how to undergird liberty.
Sure.
Right? Some things that you read would not discuss virtue. If the classics uniquely encourage virtue, uniquely, and undergird liberty, how come the Roman people were virtually enslaved from the time of Augustus at Actium in 31 until the end of the Roman experiment?
Yeah, right.
They were virtually enslaved, first under the Principate,
Yes.
right? And then later on, Diocletian developed another term for it, the dominant.
Right.
The Principate had kind of run out of steam, so we need another term for totalitarian government
Right.
that isn't going to have all of the baggage of the Principate.
Yes.
Now, someone may say, time out, invalid argument. It's because Richard's not saying that it guarantees virtue
Yes.
and undergirds liberty, but
Right.
that it encourages virtue and undergirds liberty.
Right. And I wonder as the chapter goes on, he does talk about this shift that happens in classical ed, kind of away from the rote memorization of Latin grammatical forms towards a more kind of appreciation of Greek culture in particular. Maybe that's the kind of the study of and the example of the lofty Greeks
Right.
would be the examples to imitate to become virtuous. I don't know.
Were the Greeks free, though, in the sense that Americans, maybe always, but at least at one time, enjoyed freedom?
Yeah.
I would say no.
Right. Yeah.
In Periclean times, the citizen body that voted was about 50,000 freeborn males.
Yeah.
So it did not include women. It did not include metics.
Slaves. Yeah.
Anybody.
Yeah. Right.
So while I do think that it encourages virtue and undergirds liberty, I'm not sure that uniquely so, or if that makes it worth reading. That alone. What do you think? Or do you want to punt and make me answer all of that?
I think that was kind of my original plan, right? No, I think when I've asked you about like modern current classical education, this kind of idea has popped up.
I think so.
That's one of the selling points, and you've said what you said right along those same lines is that okay, that's all well and good, but why is classical education uniquely skilled or purposed in doing that. And indeed, does modern classical education even resemble the thing that we're talking about here?
I used to say, and I still think this is true, that some of the classical authors are uniquely capable as diagnosticians of the human condition. Right? So what's wrong with humanity? Why are people so selfish? Why are we all so vicious? Right? As Hobbes said, it's a bellum omnium contra omnes. DP, that checks out if you're listening. It's a war of all against all.
Yeah.
That's in Hobbes' Leviathan. Right? So where does Hobbes get that idea? He gets it from Tacitus. With the famous quote in the Agricola where the Romans, they make a wilderness and call it peace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Something like, I don't know, desertum faciunt pacem, pacem appellant, I don't know, but in any event, very skilled diagnosticians of the human condition. This is what's wrong with humanity. You mentioned Aeschylus.
Yes.
Right? The Oresteia trilogy.
Right.
First, you have Clytemnestra murders her husband and Cassandra, this poor innocent Trojan woman. And then in the next play, there's more murder. And in the third play, more murder.
Right.
But you can't look to them for any kind of solution about this is how to fix the problems with the human condition.
Right. I mean, I guess you could make a broader argument with the Oresteia that moving away from a system of eye for an eye vengeance to a court system. I mean, the Oresteia ends with a trial.
Although, how does Athena finally decide in that case?
Well, it's sketchy.
She says, "I hold the keys to the cabinet where Zeus has the lightning bolts."
Yes, right.
She basically threatens the Furies.
Right.
Calm down, or I'm going to blast you.
Yes.
It's a divine command theory at the end.
That's very true. Right.
Which may in fact be accurate, but it doesn't seem obvious to me how it encourages civic virtue.
Right. Yeah. No, fair enough.
All right.
All right. Number 2. Right.
Yep.
Studying the classics, I think this is particularly geared towards the study of Latin.
Yes.
It develops precision in thinking and argument.
Yes.
I remember when I was toying about what language to take in high school. I remember this being one of the selling points is that why study Latin? Dead language, all the same old stuff. Right? But it was kind of the mathematical precision. And organization of the language will shape your thinking in other areas, even if you don't realize it. I remember that. So I throw it to you. What do you think of that?
I think it's true, but I often wonder whether it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing. So was I drawn to Latin because I naturally like that?
Yeah.
Or did my study of Latin develop those qualities?
Yeah.
I think this may in part explain why some people study Latin and don't develop those qualities.
Yeah.
Or don't even want to study Latin in the beginning.
Right.
They're not naturally inclined to pedantry, you might say.
Yes.
There's a man, Tracy Lee Simmons, I think, wrote the book Climbing Mount Parnassus. And another correspondent, fabulous guy. But this is part of his argument, that how precise one has to be with the identification of, say, a Latin participle requires so many interlocking steps that anybody who's thought it through thoroughly becomes very adept with precise and rigorous thinking.
Yes, yeah.
I'm willing to grant that the right kind of person will have that outcome each time, but if your goal is rigorous and precise thinking, even in the way you described it, you said a kind of mathematical precision.
Yeah.
Why not just study math?
Right.
Why not memorize the names of all the fallacies? Why not just learn logic?
Yes.
So maybe Richard is not presenting this as either the reason for studying it, or that Latin is unique in this.
Right.
But I do think it's a reason why, if you say that the study of the classics does not include Greek and Latin, you can't then cite this one.
Yes.
As a reason, a motive.
Fair enough. Yeah, and then also, I mean, so Richard, I don't think Richard himself is trying to make any kind of argument.
No.
He is quoting from letters, and he's a historian, and so out of that comes these ideas that what these early Americans said, well, this is why we should do, right?
He's describing the landscape as a very responsible historian.
Yes.
How about number 3?
One more thing to add there is just, I think it's along these lines, is that often when I find myself thinking about or talking to someone that falls into kind of the nature versus nurture debate, I almost always find myself in the nature camp.
Oh, I do too.
Right. And
almost always.
And so I think you're right. I think that you have to have at least some level of love or a passion for something.
A predisposition.
Yes, for it to produce good effects. Now, I think that you can start with something that you hate, you beat your head against, and you can develop a love for it.
Like you with rhythmic gymnastics.
Exactly, man. I'm twirling ribbons like there's no tomorrow.
But it isn't catching on, is it?
It's not catching on.
You're not predisposed.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Number 3. This one comes up a lot. The ancient world is a model worth imitating, particularly when we get to that point where the shift is towards kind of this, what Richard calls a new Hellenism.
Yes.
Right. And I thought this was interesting because that is one comparison that I will hear these days, but it's often the ancient world is a cautionary tale. Like, look what happened to Rome. Are we Rome in the 5th century?
Right.
Whereas here it's
AD, you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah, 5th century AD. Where here it's more, this is Athens is a shining city on a hill, and we've got to be like that, rather than saying beware what happened to the Greeks or beware what happened to the Romans because it's going to happen to us.
Yeah.
So I think you still hear the ancient world as a model, but it's much through a much darker lens when I hear it these days. This is much more optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot to say about this one.
Please.
But I won't say too much because we want to go on with the Richard.
Right.
I once strongly believed this, but as I get older, and hopefully as my understanding of and appreciation for the Christian faith develops, I am less sanguine about this.
Okay.
I'm less convinced of it. And some turning points are my reading of Augustine, right? Why did he write The City of God? It was, as James O'Donnell says, to finally rid himself of the mythology of Rome, to finally cleanse himself from the overwhelming influence that Virgil in particular, I grant you empire without end, imperium sine fine dedi. I've given you empire without limit.
Yeah.
And Augustine, surveys the sack of Rome in 410, and he says, basically, Virgil, that's baloney.
Right.
Rome's over. So it's becoming harder and harder for me to see the ancients as models worthy of imitation.
Yeah.
Because of my growing understanding of how Christianity interacts with it.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely comfortable with that conclusion, honestly.
Right.
I was much happier having a kind of untarnished admiration for the accomplishment of the ancients.
Sure. When I think about the things that drew me to the classics in the first place, it was seeing it through with those that rosy, rose-colored lenses. Right. It's every at least early movie that you see which depicts Rome is that everything is scrubbed and gleaming white, right?
Monochromatic,
right? I think as time's going on, you get more kind of a warts and all picture of it. And
another comment that was really seminal in my thinking on this. You know how someone that you really respect, in this case Ken Bratt, when they have one of these throwaway comments at a casual moment, right? Offhand, I guess, they can really stick.
Sure.
So it was the second time I was in Rome. It was 2008. I was with him. We're surveying with the students, all this great stuff. And I said, so at the end of the day, Ken, what do you think about this, really? I was trying to do to him what you're doing to me. Like, give me the nitty gritty.
Right.
And he said, well, when it comes to all this stuff, he says, I kind of think about the Caesars the way Augustine did. They had their earthly reward. That's it.
Yeah.
And he said it so dispassionately that it really cut in the sense of my thinking, and it's stuck with me ever since.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. Number 4. The achievements of Greece and Rome are inherently beautiful and inspiring and need no further justification for study.
Absolutely.
I love that
100%.
Right.
Number 5.
Number 5. Classical education brings needed aesthetics and cultivation to the rubes.
Who's he talking about here?
He's talking about those, the peasants working in the fields. Like even they can benefit.
Like you out there gleaning?
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly what I need. But I thought this was interesting too, because I think, in as much as anybody thinks about the place of the classics in academia or in early American history, I think probably the general assumption was, well, that's for the the nose in the air upper crust elite.
I see.
Right, but Richard,
to your mind, those people who play tennis
and polo, especially polo, right? And Richard says, no, that was really never the case. It was for everybody. It was for the elites. It was for the rubes in the field. It was for freed blacks. It was for women. It was for children. But there's definitely this idea is that by learning some classics, we'll clean you up a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I suppose that's true if literature has that power. right? And that's the Isocratean theme we were thinking about previously with Macru.
Exactly.
But if literature doesn't have that power, right? Can you just read or hear great literature performed and it have that civilizing effect on you?
No,
I don't know.
No, there's always have to. It's that you have to bring something to it.
Nature, nurture,
right. Number 6 is just it was what I just said. This idea that classical education is for everyone, men, women, all races and classes. Number 7, ancient Greek culture in particular has never been surpassed and never will be. That's kind of this idea is that even as the optimism behind the American experiment, this idea is that we're imitating the Greeks in particular, but don't get any ideas that we're ever going to be as great as they were.
Well, this one, number 7, it's pretty persuasive because it's certainly what the Romans thought. They carried around this terrible inferiority complex about the artistic superiority of the Greeks. And that's what they thought in the Carolingian Renaissance, late antiquity with the Second Sophistic. We don't have to recite it all.
Yeah.
But the Florentines, right? Lorenzo the Magnificent, he's trying to recreate 5th century Athens.
Right.
Seems like it would be foolish for me to say, no, this isn't true.
Yeah.
Just out of hand.
Right.
What do you think, Jeff?
I mean, that one kind of surprised me a bit. I think that rubs against kind of this kind of loose pedestrian kind of American mythology that America is the greatest country that ever was.
Right. And also that we're constantly improving.
Right, exactly. So if anything, in an anachronistic way, the ancient Greeks wishes they were us.
I see.
And I mean, that's kind of there's a kind of American braggadocio that's out there. So that one kind of surprised me, that idea that, yes, let's aim in the direction of the Greeks, but don't ever pretend that you're going to surpass the Greeks.
Okay.
Right. A couple more here. 8, the ancient past has as much to say about the present as it does about the past. And so it's important to just knowing these things about the ancient past are good, but they are also prisms through which we can understand the present.
Okay. So Aristotle in the Poetics says, I think this is in the Poetics, that history deals with particulars and poetry deals with universals.
Yeah.
So if you're going to read Thucydides, Livy, Herodotus, Sallust, so on and so forth, historians, apparently you're not going to be dealing with universals, but with specifics. Whereas if you read poetry, Virgil, Ovid, you're dealing with universals. And therefore the lessons that they teach are presumably universalizable.
Okay.
Applicable to all times and places.
Right.
I'm susceptible to this argument.
Yeah. No, I am too. I think this also kind of comes out of the shift to this new Hellenism. I think of something like Oedipus the King, Oedipus Rex, where he seems to kind of blend the two. He uses the story of a plague, decimating a city,
Thebes,
which had just happened to Athens.
Right.
So he's using something historical, but he's universalizing it through the stories and the travails and troubles of Oedipus
to make it a story about human self-awareness and that's how that interacts with divine fate.
Right, exactly. And then finally, number 9 is that classical education reveals a reverence for the German model of education. And so that comes up a number of times in Richard.
Yes,
is that it's almost like, in some ways, the classical education of the Americans is almost secondhand. Well, the Germans were doing it, and they were doing it
in their Gymnasia.
Yes, and they were doing it well, and so we want to import that model. So by imitating the Germans, you by default to the classics.
Correct. Which actually happened, as Richard says.
Yeah.
A number of very prominent and important classicists trained in Germany came back to the rustic woodlands of the United States and turned it into a philological paradise.
Right.
Well, those are good takeaways after a hard afternoon of gleaning in the sun.
Oh man,
right?
So much gleaning.
Yes. So we're ready to go on.
Yes. To actually talk about the chapter.
Yeah, but before we do,
yeah,
without further segue, it's time for the ads. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Attack It Publishing.
Attack It?
Yeah.
Is this another new sponsor?
Yes. Haven't you heard about them?
What do they do? What's their deal?
I think the name says it all, doesn't it?
Attack It?
Are you going to read that book or are you going to attack it? Their books are all about, I don't know, strategy.
Military strategy?
Risk analysis and playing Stratego and chess. And
once again,
is this becoming tired?
Okay, well, we have yet another publisher whose focus is so narrow.
Yeah.
Right.
Attack It Publishing?
We got to kick these guys to the curb.
Okay.
We can't do that.
So we're not going to take them on as a sponsor?
No, we're going to go with our tried and true.
Okay, which is Hackett Publishing.
That's what we're talking about.
And I think it's spelled HACKETT publishing.com.
That's right.
So the listeners, if they want to score some great, not all violently themed books, should go to hackettpublishing.com and check out their vast catalog. They do have Sun Tzu.
They do. Oh, exactly. The Art of War.
The Art of War.
Exactly.
Right?
Which I think they took over the rights of that from Attack It.
Let's not even mention the name of that other publisher anymore.
All right.
But what else will they find there?
They will find works of literature, academic works from across the spectrum of many different disciplines. They're famous. They're notable for their classical selections and thus their connection to this little podcast. But you're going to find stuff that is affordable, that is attractive, that's high quality in terms of its translation. You're going to find, for many works, multiple translators of the same work, so much to choose from. Ovid's
Metamorphoses by Stanley Lombardo and by the Ambrose translation as well. Iliad, Odyssey, Demosthenes. They've got these great readers of Xenophon. They've got Aristotle, Lucian of Samosata, Cicero, you name it.
It's great. So, listeners, do yourself a favor. Go to hackettpublishing.com. Look through their tremendous catalog. And so we let off the podcast talking about the raised prices. You're going to be astounded how much cheaper these things are. But again, high quality. Find the books that you want. Drop them into the little grocery basket. And at checkout, Dave, if they put in, what's the coupon code?
The coupon code is AN as in ad nauseum, and then the current year, which is 2024, AN2024. And then you can read what the founders read if you'd like to.
Indeed.
And that coupon code will get you what?
20% off your entire order and free shipping.
Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the good folks at Ratio Coffee. They're out there in Portland, isn't that right?
That's correct. Portland, Oregon.
Right. It's the brainchild of one Mark Hellwig. These guys have also been with us for a long time now.
Yes.
Yep. And they are the producers of these wonderful machines, high quality. They produce great coffee every time you hit that button. Bloom, brew, and ready. It's all there is to it.
Just like that.
Right.
There's no delay. There's no scorch pad. I think it's been several weeks, multiple episodes since we mentioned the BT.
Oh, I think we can drop it again, right?
Can we? Okay,
right.
Go for it.
So when you brew a cup from a ratio machine and you sip that, they take that first taste, the one thing that you're not going to notice is brackish tang.
Brackish tang.
That's right. Nowhere near this.
It's not going to be like when you are on the plain of Thermopylae.
No.
Right, and you're facing down some 1 million, according to Herodotus, marauding Persians with their 10,000 immortals, and you're there isolated, by yourself with Leonidas and 298 others.
Yes.
And you're drinking your morning coffee, right, before you give your lives for the cause of Greek victory and independence. And what comes wafting up off the sea as you're trying to drink your coffee and eat your last bagel?
The brackish tang.
Exactly.
That's right. So you're not going to experience any of that.
No.
Right? And my theory is that the bloom stage takes care of that. That's where the off-gassing happens.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what Mark said. When the hot water comes down from the Fibonacci head, little droplets in this wonderful pattern hits the ground, and what happens?
Well, you get the perfect brew, is what was
off-gassing. The carbon dioxide escapes into the biosphere harmlessly. And then you're ready to go.
You're ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah. So, these great machines, the Ratio 6 and the Ratio 8 are their flagships.
You've graduated to the big boy, the 8.
Yes, and you've had an 8 for quite some time.
Yes,
now.
I have.
Wonderful machines, and then coming soon,
5 years. I've had the 8 for 5 years.
5 years, right.
Still works like a charm.
That's it. Yes, and I think as you've told me, that you're the only person in your house who actually
drinks coffee.
So you get that machine all to yourself.
Yes, I do. But I have several family helpers who help with the production of the coffee. Because I think they secretly enjoy it too, although they don't drink it.
Gotcha. Yeah, interesting.
But the 4 is coming along.
Yes, and is that maybe sometime this fall?
September.
Excellent.
Yep. So we're not very far off before we'll be able to offer this to our listeners. It's the first affordable and beautiful half-batch pour-over coffee machine, the smallest brewer yet, an agile, sleek machine, just like Jeff, that puts out between 5 and 20 ounces of coffee per batch, enough for 1 to 2 reasonably sized cups, or 1 big travel mug.
So it's just, you press a button, you don't know what you're going to, it might be 5, it might be 20.
No.
Sometimes. How does that work?
You can set it, I'm sure.
Oh, there's
Come on, Winkles.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be precise.
Stay.
Studying Latin made me precise of thought.
Stay current.
Right.
It's deliciously simulated pour over. You don't have to do it yourself. What if the listeners would like to score a ratio 6 or 8 in anticipation of the 4? What should they do?
they should go to ratiocoffee.com. Pick out one of these wonderful machines. You can put it in your little satchel there on screen. And if they put this coupon code in, ANCOJ3, Dave, what will that get them?
It will get them 15% off. And what does the J stand for?
It's got to be Java.
Java.
Yeah.
I was going to say July.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe Jolly.
Jolly?
Yeah.
As in just like happy?
You're happy now that you got the good machine.
Okay, I'll take any of those.
Okay.
Excellent.
ANCOJ and then the numeral 3.
Check it out.
All right, so as we get back into it, Jeff, where are we headed next here in our second segment?
We're heading to Northampton, Massachusetts.
All right.
Right. And so one of the first examples that Richard gives us is from the Round Hill School.
Okay.
And where he talks about the curriculum there. You want to read something that's on page 2?
Yes.
That second paragraph there?
Yes. So he says, quote, colonial Americans would have felt quite comfortable with the curriculum at the Round Hill School at Northampton, Massachusetts. Now, before continuing the quote, I want to pause and explain this to the listener a little bit. And that is that some previous works on the classics in America with which Richard is interacting, they have maintained the position that there's a sharp distinction, that the colonial Americans had one view of the classics, and then the view of the classics kind of diminished in fervency and interest as time went on.
Okay.
Richard wrote this book in part to disprove that thesis.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
And so that's what he's saying here. Colonial Americans would have felt quite comfortable with the curriculum at the Round Hill School at Northampton, Massachusetts, an antebellum academy that emphasized the classical languages and attracted students from across the United States. Indeed, in seeking to introduce high German standards, the academy surpassed most colonial grammar schools in rigor. The academy's directors, Joseph Cogswell and George Bancroft, boasted that their students' training in Greek and Latin, which included the reading of the works of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Juvenal, easily exceeded college entrance requirements. The school sent 291 graduates to college between 1823 and 1831, 50 of them to Harvard.
Impressive.
It is impressive.
Really impressive.
Focus on the rigor of grammar. You're having high school students read Aeschylus and Sophocles?
Yeah, it's incredible.
That's challenging in grad school, right?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Aeschylus much more so than Sophocles, of course.
Yes.
But then he goes on to say, though exceptional, Round Hill was not unique. In fact, says Richard, Boston Latin School was even more famous for its classical education.
Then what was their curriculum?
Well, apparently the curriculum included, says Richard, Phaedrus, Cornelius Nepos, Caesar Sallust, Ovid's Metamorphoses, Cicero's Orations, Tacitus his Agricola and Germania, Horace's Odes and Epodes, the Greek Gospels, and Homer's Iliad. That's an education in itself.
It is, right. And one of the things that struck me, he talks about the curricula of a number of different schools, and certain names pop up in most of them. Cicero and Homer show up a lot, but it also kind of struck me as how widely varied these curricula was, and like even a name like Juvenal shows up a lot as almost as an author that, but seems to, by its repetition, seems to suggest that they saw his Juvenal's satires also as foundational.
Absolutely,
which surprised me because that was an author that was even in undergrad and grad school was never an author that was pressed upon me as one that I had to learn.
Right, he's fallen out of popularity.
Yeah,
he's famous for the panem et circenses, right? Mm-hmm. The bread and circuses.
Right.
There's as many targets in Rome. Must I always be a listener? Is how he starts. There's as many targets as Rome. In Rome as he could ever want. So just make fun of everybody.
Right. Dave, could you read a little bit more? So he talks about Charles Francis Adams,
right?
Who was related to John Adams.
Yeah, the son and grandson, I guess, of U.S. presidents and the U.S. minister to Great Britain during the Civil War.
Yep.
So while a student at Harvard, says Richard, Adams wrote in his diary regarding Francis Jenks, his teacher, he implanted or strengthened in me an early taste for reading by a simple method which I should always recommend to a good schoolmaster. After having got my lesson, he used to permit me to read a Plutarch, which he kept on purpose in the school, and gave it to me as a mark of distinction and scholarship, in this way exciting me by every motive which can act upon a boy to gain instruction. I believe it is to this I owe my clear ideas on the subject of history.
So
I approve of this method.
You do. It's like, so giving someone a Plutarch as a reward.
Yes, I've never done that, but the idea is you make things that other people think are difficult, you make them rewards
Yes.
for performance.
Yeah.
And you thus motivate people to desire things that they don't know are difficult.
Right.
Or challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like how Tom Sawyer got the others to help him paint the fence.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You treat something that other people take as tedious as a coveted prize.
Right.
Difficult as a coveted prize.
No, I like this a lot too. Right. It's really quite inspiring.
But what about girls' education? Can you take us to the Sparta Academy in North Carolina?
Yes. Let me. This is over on page 3. Let me read a bit from this passage. Richard writes, the United States was unique among Western nations in offering girls classical education on a large scale. Hundreds of new female academies instructed their students in the classical languages. Between 1810 and 1870, more than half the catalogs of female academies advertised the teaching of Greek, Latin, or both. Now, I have to say this, I think this would blow people's minds, in as much as they would care about this, or if they would think
You're
about...
assuming that people care about whether or not women could read Greek and Latin in the 19th century?
I'm thinking that I think there's a kind of loose notion that, of course, early America was sexist in the
highly chauvinistic and
highly
backward.
chauvinistic, right? And so, were women? Did they study Greek and Latin? No, of course they weren't even allowed to go to school.
Right.
That would be kind of like
I think so.
The reaction, I think, a lot of people, and so I found this absolutely fascinating. He continues. This statistic is all the more remarkable in view of the fact that girls' schools were not as concerned with meeting college entrance requirements in the classics as boys, since far fewer colleges admitted women than men.
Okay, so there is your supposed chauvinism.
Right.
That if you were a woman, you weren't admitted into many colleges.
Right. And maybe behind this, too, is, Greek and Latin are good for producing virtuous women.
Yeah.
Right? And so it doesn't matter that they're not going on to college.
Can you read on?
Yes. In Pendleton, South Carolina, a group of 13 and 14-year-old girls outperformed a group of boys in an examination in Greek and Latin.
Let me say, no surprise.
Right? Yeah, without a doubt. Although boys continued to receive more classical training than girls, for instance, between 1790 and 1840, 91% of boys' schools in Virginia and North Carolina advertised Greek, Latin, or both. Girls received far more instruction in Greek and Latin than they ever had before. One female academy in North Carolina was even named the Spartan Academy. And then here's
Sparta Academy.
Sorry, Sparta Academy. And then here's Richard. I like some of his little witty things.
He's trying to drop a joke here on us.
He says, although it is doubtful that its students were allowed to run around half naked like Spartan girls.
Yeah, it's doubtful.
It is very unlikely.
Be careful, though, because Thomas Flynn is going to bring up another corrigenda on us here.
He's going to say that actually these North Carolinian
before they gave the speech at the Lupercalia. We know you're listening, Thomas.
That's right, yes.
But it is remarkable. It certainly defies kind of an easy conclusion one might draw about the 19th century.
Sure.
That women weren't allowed access to these things.
Yeah.
So whatever the opinions may have been at the time about the different abilities and qualities of men and women intellectually, women were not barred from the study of classics, but encouraged and outcompeted men.
Yes, exactly. Right. That's why I find this fascinating. If I think about... I think when most people think about, the push for women's suffrage and that, you may think about these figures from the late 19th century, early 20th century, right? But those were just kind of dominoes.
Susan B. Anthony and others.
Exactly. Stanton and the right and the like. But they were, the dominoes lined up behind them go much further back. I would have to think that this kind of idea is connected. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that this was also interesting, and we were talking in the last time we were looking at the Maru textbook, and I think it was just our last episode
on the Ephebia.
Right? A similar thing seems to have taken place with these young women going through these academies. That these women bound together by that experience,
right? It
kind of ripples out into the community and becomes part of kind of the larger girls' club.
Yes. Can you read that paragraph
sure.
that begins? It's on page 3. Can you believe we're only on page 3?
Right, I know.
It's so much fun.
It is.
Founded largely.
Yes, and again to the listeners, this is a fabulously written book.
Yeah, it is.
It's a joy to read. So Richard writes, founded largely by middle-class women and appealing to middle-class as well as elite girls, female academies validated reading as a woman's pursuit and offered young girls educated role models. Students often established literary societies at these academies and then went on to organize adult versions among the women of their communities, both urban and rural.
The rural part, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You can kind of understand that in the cities
Yes.
where getting together to talk about, book 2 of the Iliad, the catalog of ships, maybe that's a little more convenient. But when you've been out gleaning all day and you come in the evening, you're going to then sit down with the rest of the ladies and you're going to talk about Cicero's speech against Mark Antony.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
It is remarkable. It really kind of punctures a lot of kind of the stereotypical balloons.
Correct.
The people, I think that, certainly myself, kind of assumed the kinds of divisions that there were in terms of class and in terms of geography.
And then he makes a point here in the last sentence of that paragraph about things like abolition and later women's suffrage.
Sure. He writes, furthermore, the friendships that girls formed in the academies became the foundation for networks that made women key players in crucial antebellum reform movements. All right. So that's exactly what we were saying.
Yeah.
So this is the catalyst for a lot of the stuff that well, it comes still antebellum, but then it kind of explodes in the latter part of the 19th century.
So maybe I shouldn't have included suffrage because I think that came quite a bit later.
Right.
But certainly abolition, in the 1830s, 1840s, and 50s.
Yep.
So we got to talk about the McGuffey readers.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have a lot of time left in this particular episode.
Well, maybe we could end with this.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. This is page 4. Where should we pick up, Jeff?
Let us see. So he's talking about a number of these texts that were coming out at this time, not just texts of translations and editions of the classical works themselves, but a lot of these readers. Mm-hmm. And he writes near the bottom of page.
Well, I'm sorry. Do we want to talk about African Americans studying the classics as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't think we should skip that.
No, definitely. Right. You want to go a little bit higher on page 4 there?
So let's see. By the 1850s, a few schools in large northern cities like Philadelphia were offering a classical education to African American students, female and male. The co-educational Institute for Colored Youth advertised a classical curriculum that included Virgil's Aeneid, Horace's Odes, Cicero's Orations, Xenophon's Anabasis, and the Greek New Testament. Baltimore's William Watkins Academy for Negro Youth also emphasized Greek and Latin. As with white girls, classical education led to African American reading societies, such as the Philadelphia Colored Reading Society, which contended that from classical literature, quote, a fund of ideas is acquired on a variety of subjects. The taste is greatly improved by conversing with the best models. The imagination is enriched by the fine scenery with which the classics abound. And an acquaintance is formed with human nature, together with the history, customs, and manners of antiquity. End quote. Black women established the Female Minervian Association. I didn't know you could make Minerva into an adjective like that.
I approve.
But I like it.
Yep.
In 1832, declaring that, quote, the cultivation of the mind is all important and far more so than the adornment of the body. The following year, African Americans in Washington, D.C. raised money to emancipate a slave by hosting a program of orations that included Plato and the immortality of the soul, Brutus, and an epilogue to Addison's Cato. Famous play.
Yeah, extraordinary.
It isn't it?
This is stuff that I had never heard of.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean a lot in embedded in those quotes there is this idea by studying the classics, you improve yourself, right? You most importantly you improve your mind. But it's a way.
I kind of hope that's true, but I've been studying classics a long time, and so have you.
Yeah.
And look at us.
I know exactly. What are we doing wrong?
Can't take us anywhere.
Right. But definitely that argument that by reading these things you become a better human being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or at least much refined in taste. I like that.
Yeah.
And it's
Maybe
not.
that's
It's
better.
not so dissimilar from what we were talking to Stan Lombardo about when we're saying that. The classics have this enduring appeal because they were designed primarily for the ear.
Yes.
They were designed to be heard, and so they have a certain kind of longevity that it's difficult for other literature to achieve.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, very well said. All right, let's talk about these readers.
Okay.
Yes. So these McGuffey readers. So when I read this was completely new to me.
Okay.
But you've heard of these?
I have heard of the McGuffey readers.
Do you have one?
I do not.
Okay.
Nope.
So,
but now I want to get one.
Right.
Just because it would be a nice slice of Americana.
So is this now just in terms of so in your own program you use the Moss reader?
Is there a joke coming here?
No, there's not a joke there. I'm wondering about the how close in time is the McGuffey reader to the
Moss wrote his first thing in 1873.
Okay, so but I mean not that far away.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. So what were these McGuffey readers and why were they important?
Well, they were an English textbook, basically.
Okay.
As Richard says, they were, quote, designed to teach young school children the glories of the English language as well as morality and patriotism, and they featured classical themes. Included was Lord Byron's Song of the Bard. So Lord Byron, Jeff, can you tell us about him?
Yeah, a romantic poet of the early 19th century. He was instrumental to some degree in the Greek fight for independence. He certainly was
A Philhellene,
right? Lived in Athens, died in Greece during the War of Independence, and famously carved his name Byron in one of the columns of Poseidon's temple at Sunion.
Yes, I've seen that, haven't you?
Yes,
Incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible.
Why does he get away with such vandalism?
I don't know, but a lot of people followed his example.
They did. Well, not only in defacing things, but they followed his example in going to fight for Greek independence.
Indeed.
Many European noblemen.
Right.
So this is a very contemporary kind of thing for McGuffey to include. And here is Lord Byron's Song of the Bard, which begins like this. The Isles of Greece, where burning Sappho loved and sung, where grew the arts of war and peace, where Delos rose and Phoebus sprung. Eternal summer gilds them yet, but all except their sun is set.
So it kind of ends on this kind of melancholy note.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Greeks are nothing if not melancholic.
Right, that's true.
I think.
Yep.
McGuffey also included Byron's Rome and scenes from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Right? Jan McGuffey reader has a lean and hungry look.
Yeah.
Such as the quarrel between Brutus and Cassius and Antony's speech over Caesar's body. Thomas Flynn strikes again.
Exactly. He was fully clothed at that point. Right.
In, quote, A View of the Colosseum, Orville Dewey exalts, I went to see the Colosseum by moonlight. It is the monarch, the majesty of ruins. There is nothing like it. What do you think, Jeff?
I've seen the Colosseum by moonlight.
I have too.
I think Dewey's onto something.
No.
Yeah, no?
The Pantheon is where it's at.
In the moonlight?
I've never seen the Pantheon in the moonlight.
You're right. I think the Pantheon, broadly speaking, is where it's at.
Yes.
But I love
when
the
you walk
Colosseum.
in and you look up at that oculus,
It's incredible.
it's really unbelievable.
It is. Right?
You have to remember the Colosseum was used as a cattle pen for many centuries.
It's true.
There still is a little bit of a Augean stench about it, you might
It's
say.
a little kettle penny.
It is. But the McGuffey readers, were they successful?
Oh, indeed. And he tells us, Richard tells us on page 5 that between 1836 and 1920, 120 million copies of this thing were sold.
That's hard to believe because were there even that many people in the United States?
No, I mean there's
1836 to 1920?
There's roughly 3 times that many people in the United States now.
That would mean 1 in every 3 persons has a McGuffey reader.
It's like
I think there had to be some McGuffey hoarders.
Right.
I think there were people buying McGuffey readers and using them to, I don't know, prop up their cattle sheds or something.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. It's like the McDonald's hamburgers, billions and billions sold.
Yes.
Everybody has had a McDonald's hamburger.
Right. None consumed.
Right.
Billions and billions sold.
Right.
Well, this book was so popular, and it was a purveyor of classical themes. No Greek and Latin in it.
Right.
But as Richard says, other passages include an anonymous essay on Alexander the Great and Washington Irving's description of Pompey's pillar. Quote, the inclusion of material concerning the classical world in an English reader is not so surprising when one considers that the editor of the series, William H. McGuffey, was...
He was a professor of ancient languages.
Yes.
Right? And he apparently made out like a bandit.
He knew how to do this.
Yes.
He's like the Rick Riordan.
Totally.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah.
Right. So I hope his family maintained the copyright and
I doubt it.
Continue to profit to this very day.
I doubt it. But I hope so too for his sake.
So, hey, we are up against it.
Yes.
So we're definitely going to continue this conversation in the next episode.
I
right?
think so, yes. Number 155, we'll cover some more of Richard. We didn't even get through the first chapter.
We didn't get to the first 5 pages.
I know.
Right,
it's
right.
because it's such fascinating material.
It is, right? And you don't want to, there's great stuff. You don't want to leave it behind.
No,
right?
no. And maybe we're being a tad bit undisciplined this evening.
Maybe a little
Winkle?
bit, right?
Okay.
Yes, exactly. But I will not apologize for
Don't.
that. Right, all right. But we got to get out of here. So, but before we do,
Right.
we were just talking about 19th century readers. Let's talk about another one, the Moss
Okay.
Reader from the 19th century, which you have this wonderful program
Yes.
based around. Tell us about it.
Charles Melville Moss wrote a first Greek reader, and it was in the 1890s, I think is the first time. I said earlier 1873, too early. I think the first edition was 1893.
Okay.
Now that my memory corrects itself. So keep your core agenda at bay.
Hey, we're looking at you, Mr. Flynn.
I'm getting a little touchy. Anyway, he wrote this great reader in which he says the study of languages should be primarily an exercise of the mind, not the thumbs.
Yes.
Don't spend all your time pouring through the lexicon. Use your mind and imagination to find the word that fits the context. And that's kind of a picture of his overall approach, which is learning the Greek language. Yes, you learn forms and grammar, but that's not the purpose or the main way to learn. It's by reading stories.
Yeah.
And he starts out with these great stories drawn from a wide array of classical authors and some original compositions. There's even William Tell in this one.
Oh, no way.
You know, the guy who shot the apple off his son's head?
Right.
In excellent Attic Greek. Beautiful stuff.
Fantastic.
So go to mossmethod.com, check out my program, and it will take you from...
neophyte to erudite.
That's correct. And I think it is self-paced, it's expert, and it is accessible. I like to say there may be better programs out there in terms of, I don't know, the quality of the instruction. I'm not going to really comment on that, but I'm quite confident there is not a better value. So the combination of price and the expertise I'm offering, I challenge you to find something similar.
Yes, and you also, once you sign up, you also get to connect with people from around the world who
That's
are also
correct.
participating. And you have weekly, my favorite part, the Moffus Hours,
The Moffus Hours, just last Friday, we were reading some adapted Xenophon, the Anabasis, with folks from California, folks from New York, folks from Switzerland, folks from Maryland. A wide array of persons enjoying the Greek language together. It's fantastic.
Fantastic. Mossmethod.com. There's lots of free stuff they can check out.
Yes.
Great stuff. Now, also, if people want to learn Latin, you've got something for them, too.
Yes, it takes them ab initio, from the ground up. Now, if someone out there is thinking, ab initio, that doesn't mean from the ground up. It means from the beginning. Yes, I know the noun initio. If you look it up in the lexicon, initium, initii, neuter, it's second declension, and you can translate it as the beginning. But I'm trying to teach you how to enjoy the language.
Exactly. So back off, Tom.
Boy, poor Tom.
I'm sorry, Tom.
You're just pummeling him. But to take ab initio as from the ground up, that's what I'm after in my Latin instruction.
Yes.
Have a sense of the language that's idiomatic. Anyway, go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. I use the Lingua Latina per se illustrata book of Hans Orberg. Unit 1, chapters 1 through 9. Unit 2, chapters 10 through 18. I'm recording in the studio with other students like yourself. They are charming, intelligent, funny individuals. You get to watch me teach them. You learn from their successes. You learn from their mistakes. It's really quite good viewing. It's must-watch TV,
Excellent.
you might say.
Fantastic. And if you go to latinperidium.com, you've got, is it well over 2,000?
2,100 almost.
2,100 free videos that people can check out.
That's right.
On the way. Yes. Don't hesitate. Give it a look. So, Dave, before we go, also people to thank. We got Mishka,
yes,
our wonderful engineer.
She's going to turn this one around in record time, I'm hoping.
For the holiday?
For the holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's Independence Day where she's from. So, we'll just see. But
right. So she's thinking, what's the big deal?
Exactly.
Right.
But thank you so much,
Of
Mishka.
course, right. And then, hey, what about this Scott Minzen and Ken Tamplin?
The intro music, this blazing guitar, these arpeggios. Ken composed it, plays the drums, plays the bass, programmed the bass.
Does it all.
Scott's doing the guitar, the bumper music, and we have a little bit of an interesting outro here.
Yeah, something different.
Yeah, that we should mention. If anyone goes back to episode 44, The Founders and the Classics, we ended with a song that Ken adapted called God Save the Queen.
That's right.
That was meant to be a little tongue-in-cheek. American independence, right? And we're singing the Queen's praises.
Right.
Come on, it's a joke. But today we have something else, which is another composition of Ken's. It's a song about a woman named Alma Rose. This was a violinist, an American violinist during the Second World War, who was playing in the concentration camps. I'm fascinated by her story. If I can find some way to attach it to the classics, we'll do a whole episode on her at some point.
Sounds great.
But there's an electric violin in this piece in honor of Alma Rose, and there's some kind of patriotic themed music, you might say, which I thought fit the episode. The guitarist is a guy named Joey Tafola. So
Indeed.
We hope you enjoy it on the outro. But hey, Jeff, what if they want to subscribe?
If they want to subscribe, if they want to get in touch with us, you want to shout out, you want to you have a question, you have a complaint, a corrigendum.
Even a corrigendum. We won't mention the guy who provided us with two good ones.
We will not. Write to Dave. Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V.
Or Jeff at adnauseam.com. Do not forget the V. More stuff to say. Go to the website, leave a review, recommend it to your friends, get some merch, get a hat, get a sticker, a shirt, something like that.
Yeah.
If you would like, we're just so grateful that you're listening.
Yes, indeed. We really are appreciative. And Dave, you have our gustatory parting shot, I believe.
I do, and I found this one from the Pater Patriae.
Oh, this is very fitting, yes.
George Washington, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. He says, quote, "My manner of living is plain, and I do not mean to be put out of it." George Washington wrote in 1786 to George William Fairfax. Apparently, at the time, you had to be named George. It's like a requirement.
It was a requirement.
George Mason, George Washington, George Fairfax. Washington continues, quote, "A glass of wine and a bit of mutton are always ready. Those who look for more will be disappointed." What do you think, Jeff?
Oh, I love it.
You gonna go home to a glass of wine and a bit of mutton?
I mean, I love it that Washington, he always had mutton at the ready.
That's right. It's like, I don't know, ready peel mutton or something like that.
Ready peel mutton, exactly. Right.
In a little Ziploc bag he carried in his blue coat.
He always had it
A little bit of
within
mutton.
reach and some wine. Right?
Yeah, so he would say, those British, they've got nuttin' on this mutton.
Exactly right. Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.